and try to understand the situation as best we can. When we when we interview victims and witnesses in these cases, we generally always try to record the interview. If anyone's ever played the game telephone, sometimes things can be misrepresented when it's being translated. So don't be too surprised if we ask to record it. The interviews with victims can be held wherever you're comfortable. Advocates are available to sit in with you if you wish. If you have a close friend or someone that you feel comfortable with, we're okay with them sitting in with you. The only exception to that becomes a situation in which that person is also involved with the case, whether they're a witness or somebody that you've confided in to tell the story. The details of the crime, I mentioned that we tend to ask very specific questions. When it comes down to it, we have to understand what all happened during the assault. Was it something that was on the outside of the body? Was it a penetration of the body? However that ended up. Was there initial consent that was then withdrawn? I think that's one of the situations where people probably have a hard time reporting on, because they think, hey, I originally started to be okay with this, but then I wasn't, and then it continued. Consent can be withdrawn at any point in time, and we don't want people to be confused that just because they start to engage with something doesn't mean they can't set up boundaries at a certain time. As far as the details go, we're probably going to ask you questions about, what your previous interactions had been, just to try and understand not only the situation with that person. Was it a person you knew? Was it a person that you've been involved with before? Or is it a complete stranger? So we're going to ask some questions as to how it led up to the situation. Keep in mind some of the questions, and we tend to tell people this when we're asking or at the beginning of the interview. Some of the questions may sound like blaming questions, but they're not. We try our best to make sure people understand that we're not trying to blame people, but sometimes it's hard to formulate questions that don't have that kind of that reception when it comes to asking the specific questions about it. Other steps that we'll take in these investigations, obviously our interview with the victim is very important. Generally, the victim and the perpetrator are the two people that know what happened in the situation. If there's witnesses to it, that's always a benefit. We'll seek out witnesses, but witnesses might not be witnesses that saw it happen, but they might be that person that you confided in directly after it happened. So we want to be able to talk with those people. We also will usually try to contact the perpetrator or suspect in these cases towards the end of our information gathering of what happened. If we can go in having a decent understanding of what had occurred, we have a higher likelihood of getting them to confess to parts, if not all of the investigation, which can help us, find that accountability that we're looking for. Some things to consider if you become a victim of sexual assault, or somebody that becomes a victim of sexual assault. Um, the one of the things that makes our cases stronger to hold people accountable in these cases is the physical evidence. I can't tell you how many times we don't have that when we're doing the investigations. It becomes a bit harder to make the case prosecutable, not impossible by any means, but it takes a bit more legwork without that physical evidence to attach the science to it. So one of the things to consider is if you are a victim of it, or you know somebody that becomes a victim of it, we want you to understand there's certain precautions that person can take to help preserve whatever evidence may be there. Not showering right away, trying to retain the clothing you were wearing at the time. If it happened on a bed, retaining the bed sheets, and try to make sure you have access to that stuff to where we can then send that off for laboratory testing. One of the things that with adult sexual assaults that I don't think a number of people are aware of is that there is actually a program in the state where if you are a victim of sexual assault or know somebody, they either you or they can go to a hospital and get a sexual assault evaluation done, usually through the use of a sexual assault nurse. And they can collect the evidence then. That doesn't mean that it has to be reported right then to law enforcement. If a person is wavering as to whether or not they want to report or not, they can still go get the sexual assault kit done, and then that kit is sent to the department with either a Jane Doe or John Doe label on it, and that hospital holds those records to where if you ever decide to report later, then that physical evidence is preserved. And with that being said, the main reason I bring that up is, it may be something that you think of later on. You think, okay, finally, well, I'm not as concerned about me. I can get through this myself. But one of the things that I want people to think about too is that generally when people perform these acts on another, whether it's you or someone you know, they generally aren't going to stop those acts unless they're held accountable for it. And that being said, it's important for the community's sake, the safety of the community, to show that courage to stand up and say something, and at the same time, if you're wavering on that decision, again, having that physical evidence being preserved in such a way that if you do decide, hey, it's been a month, it's been 2 months, it's been a year down the road, and I finally have the courage and I'm ready to report this, it's something that we have a much higher likelihood of being able to investigate to a point where we can hold that person accountable and try to protect other people that haven't been subjugated to it yet, but could be at risk. Other than that, when it comes to adults, unless Detective Peter has any more comments that he'd like to make on that, I think he's going to go into child sexual assault investigations.
Yeah, thanks, Detective Harvey. That was excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about child sex assault investigations. So in the general shape of the investigation is going to be similar to any investigation involving an adult, but there are some additional things we have to consider in dealing with juveniles. First of all is that we are mandatory reporters on these things, and so any if we have reasonable cause of child abuse or neglect, we're going to contact the Department of Child Youth and Family Services, CPS, basically, and that's the same is going to go for any kind of physician, any kind of mental health counselor, any kind of school employee. They're going to have to report to CPS. So regardless of whether it gets reported to us as the sheriff's office or if it gets reported to one of those other entities that I mentioned, it's going to get reported to CPS, and then CPS is going to report back to us. So that's how that first part is going to go. Now, obviously, the safety of the child is going to be paramount to us. So regardless of what happens, we need to make sure that that kid is being taken care of. If we have a protective family member, for example, that can take care of that child while we work through our investigation, that's preferred. It is possible that we can take a kid into protective custody if that's not possible for whatever reason, but we prefer to place a child voluntarily with somebody. When these investigations get started, typically a patrol officer is going to take the first initial contact with the reporting party, but they're in all likelihood not going to talk to the juvenile. Our county protocol says that children 10 and under have to be interviewed by someone who's received specialized training in child interview. I'm one of the members of our department that can interview children. However, generally speaking, on a case where a child is alleged to have been sexually assaulted, we're going to work with Bridget Collins Child Advocacy Center in Mount Vernon. They have a full-time child forensic interviewer on staff. Actually, she's an employee of Skagit County Prosecutor's Office, but we have a contract with Bridget Collins to have her conduct interviews, and that's she stays up on the latest in academic research, the latest in case law. She's very experienced and very good at these kinds of things. So we will coordinate with the caregiver and with CPS to get a forensic interview done of the child as soon as possible. A physical exam can also be done. A sexual assault nursing examiner can do them. I believe Peace Health has a pediatric SANE nurse on staff, but that person isn't going to be available 24 hours a day. So there's a chance we may have to go to another hospital to do that. I believe Island Hospital in Anacortes has one, and then Bridget Collins, the Child Advocacy Center, has a SANE nurse that they contract with as well. So it's also possible to arrange to have that physical exam done at the same time as the forensic interview goes. And let's see if there's anything else that's different. Yeah, as Detective Harvey was saying, there's other steps that we need to do beyond that initial interview. Typically, based on whatever the child discloses during the forensic interview, that's what we're going to establish the elements of our crime from, to figure out what exactly happened, and then also other potential sources of corroboration. So whether that child documented something in a diary, whether that kid texted a friend the details of what happened, or anything of that nature. Maybe there's surveillance footage that was captured somehow that would corroborate the child's story. Those are all things that we're going to be looking for. And generally speaking, our last thing that we're going to do once we have our ducks in a row is contact our suspect in the case and then conduct an interview. And then ultimately we'll decide how we want to proceed. Obviously, every case is different, whether we're going to proceed with an arrest of that person or whether we're going to write the case up and forward it to the prosecuting attorney's office for charging. Trying to think, I think that probably just about covers it. Obviously, in juvenile cases, we will work with SAFE San Juan as well. So if you need a victim advocate, they're available for those kinds of things as well. So unless there's something else, I'm going to pass it off to the next person.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucas and Ray. So that brings us to Teresa from the prosecuting attorney's office.